You ever come home after a long shift, ready to microwave some leftovers and crash on the couch only to find Karen from the HOA standing in your kitchen like she owns the place? Yeah, that happened. And no, I'm not exaggerating. She literally broke into my house. Name's Silas Granger. 38, divorced, no kids, just me and my dog Zeus, living in a quiet cul-de-sac in Westfield Oaks. Or it was quiet. Until Francine Dalton became HOA president last year. She's the kind of woman who thinks a closed garage door is a personal insult. Mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, and a voice that sounds like she gargles gravel and entitlement for breakfast. It all started with the trash bin. I forgot to roll it in one morning after pickup. That's it. Barely noon and I already had 3 missed calls from the HOA hotline. Yes, that's a thing now, and a warning note duct taped to the front of my garage like it was a crime scene. Francine had written it herself, in red ink, underlining violation 5 times like she was grading a middle school essay. I laughed it off, rolled the bin in, and thought that was the end of it. Rookie mistake. The next day, my mailbox was open. Nothing stolen, but all my mail had been rearranged alphabetically. I knew it was her. Francine had a weird thing about order. Once, she fined my neighbor Olivia for having too many irregular daisies in her front garden. Said it disrupted the visual balance of the street. But then it escalated. Fast. Thursday morning, I came home from the night shift at the hospital. I'm an ER tech, tired and starving. I walked in, dropped my bag, kicked off my boots, and froze. There was Francine.
In my kitchen.
Wearing latex gloves. Holding a clipboard. And scribbling something while standing next to my open refrigerator. What the hell are you doing in here? I shouted. She didn't even flinch. Just looked up like I'd interrupted a business meeting. Silas, this is an HOA inspection. I received anonymous reports that your kitchen may be harboring unapproved appliances. We have standards. In my kitchen? This neighborhood has rules, Mr. Granger. If the inside of your home affects property values, you broke in. She had the nerve to roll her eyes. Your back window was unlocked. That's an invitation in some states. Not this one. I grabbed my phone and called the cops while she kept rambling about my microwave being non-compliant with the HOA's aesthetic mission. I swear I'm not making this up. She was citing bylaws she clearly made up on the spot. The cops showed up 20 minutes later. By then, she'd moved on to inspecting my spice rack. Officer Delgado took one look at her and sighed. Again, Mrs. Dalton? I blinked. Again? She tried to inspect a neighbor's water heater last month. Claimed it was emitting a disruptive hum. We gave her a warning. This is breaking and entering. She thinks HOA rules override state law. Francine stood there, arms crossed, like she was the hero of her own courtroom drama. This is a civil matter. HOA jurisdiction supersedes. No, it doesn't, I snapped. You're trespassing. And you're about to find out what SWAT jurisdiction looks like. Now, I didn't actually expect SWAT to take interest, but I made a few calls. See, my cousin Owen? He works dispatch. I explained the situation, how she had a clipboard full of notes, was rifling through my kitchen drawers, and claimed to be part of an enforcement committee that doesn't legally exist. He patched me through to a supervisor. Turns out, Francine had a record of escalating behavior. The HOA had received 13 formal complaints from residents about her overreach just this quarter. This is your lucky day, the supervisor said. We've been waiting for something actionable. The next morning, I started a live stream. Yeah, I went full broadcast mode. Set up my tripod across the street from Francine's house. Called it the HOA Files. Live from Westfield Oaks. Had Zeus sitting next to me in a lawn chair like my sidekick. Within 15 minutes, over 500 people were watching. Good morning, America, I said into the camera. Meet Francine Dalton, HOA president, kitchen breaker inner, property value vigilante.
And today?
She's getting a visit from the fine folks at SWAT. The comments went wild. People were tagging news stations. My buddy Seth brought donuts and a thermos of coffee. We had a whole block party going. Across the street, Francine opened her blinds and saw the camera pointed at her house. She came storming out in a pink robe, waving her phone. Silas, this is a violation of my privacy. Funny, I said. So, was you crawling through my kitchen window? You're harassing me. Swaddle sorted out. Smile for the internet. That's when the black SUVs rolled in. Francine froze on her porch. The SWAT team didn't come in guns blazing, obviously, but they were serious. They had a warrant. Based on the footage from my security cam, plus logs from other neighbors who'd been documenting her inspections, it was enough for a judge. She tried to slam her door. They stopped it with one boot. And then the live stream went viral. Francine Dalton wasn't handcuffed. That seemed to irritate a lot of folks in the live stream chat, but the officers had their reasons. She was escorted firmly into the back of one of the black SUVs, hands visibly trembling, muttering something about her constitutional mandate to monitor community standards. Her eyes darted past the camera lens like she was trying to erase the entire scene from memory by sheer force of will. I shut down the live stream once the car doors closed and the convoy started moving. Zeus barked once, like he was calling it a wrap. Folks clapped. Not for me, but for what that moment symbolized. The end of unchecked authority, or at least the beginning of it. Olivia from down the street handed me a USB drive. These are the videos I've been compiling for months: doorbell footage, audio recordings, scanned letters. It's all labeled by date. I nodded, taking it carefully. You documented everything? I knew it had come to a head eventually, she said. She tried to have my son's treehouse condemned. Said it violated the vertical uniformity clause. I don't even know what that means. Seth walked over, balancing a clipboard on a stack of lawn chairs. And here's the petition. 62 signatures. We're filing with the city to audit the HOA's finances. Something's not adding up. That caught my attention. You found something? He lowered his voice. We think she's been taking a monthly administrative stipend from HOA dues. It's not in the bylaws. And it's not small. How much? Almost $22,000. This year alone. I glanced at the USB drive in my hand, then at the retreating SUV. She's not just power hungry. She's embezzling. Seth nodded. And we've got bank records. Kevin from Lot 72 works at the credit union. He pulled the statements. I exhaled slowly. This had gone way beyond clipboard tyranny and obsessive trash bin enforcement. Francine had been laundering community funds under the radar, and now we had enough to poke a crater through her empire. The next morning, I met with Detective Amber Ruiz at the precinct. She was in her early 40s, wore no-nonsense slacks and a blazer, and had a tone that made you sit up straight even if you weren't guilty. You're the ER tech from Westfield Oaks? She asked, flipping through the files I'd brought. Silas Granger. I also live-streamed the HOA president's meltdown yesterday. She didn't look up. Yeah, I saw it. You have any idea how many calls we got because of that? Even the mayor's office phoned in. Said we need to get a handle on the narrative. Is that good or bad? Depends how much you've got. I slid the USB across the table. Doorbell footage. Audio files. Letters. Plus a community petition to trigger a financial audit. The residents are furious. She's been siphoning funds and using her fake committees to justify it. She plugged in the drive, brows furrowing as folders popped up. 67 individual files. You all organized this. We've been piecing it together for months. I just happened to catch the breaking and entering part on camera. She clicked through a few videos, her face unreadable. Then she paused. This one has a date stamp from March. Is this her entering someone's backyard at 3 in the morning? That's Olivia's house. She installed motion lights after the third incident. Detective Ruiz leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing.
This isn't just trespassing.
If she's been surveilling homes without permission and accessing financial accounts tied to the HOA, we're talking about wire fraud, misappropriation of funds, and unlawful entry on multiple counts. You think it'll stick? If even half this holds up in court, she's looking at serious time. I left the station with a copy of the official complaint and a case number. By the time I got home, someone had already printed out the complaint and taped it to the community bulletin board, bold letters, no red ink. That night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but instinct told me this one mattered. Granger, I said. I assume you're happy with yourself. Francine's voice was lower than usual, like she was trying to sound like a victim and a prosecutor at the same time. You're not supposed to be contacting me, I said. There's an active investigation. I know the law better than most, which is why you're under investigation for 6 different crimes. You think this makes you a hero? All you've done is fracture the community, undermined order. Order? You broke into my house. You forged committees. You stole from your neighbors. I streamlined inefficiencies. The HOA was floundering before I took over. And now you're floundering inside a federal audit. There was a long pause. Then her voice changed colder. I will sue you for defamation. Go for it. The live stream has 6 million views. I'm sure the jury will sympathize. She hung up. 2 days later, we held an emergency HOA meeting in the community center gym. The bylaws allowed for a leadership vote if more than 50% of residents signed a petition. We had 62. I stood at the podium, flanked by Olivia and Seth. The place was packed. Even Kevin from the credit union showed up with a stack of printouts detailing every transaction Francine had initiated using HOA funds. The documents had been verified by the city's financial compliance office. Detective Ruiz arrived midway through the meeting. She didn't say anything, just stood at the back, arms crossed, observing. We voted. Unanimously, Francine was removed as HOA president. Her fake committees were dissolved. An interim board was formed, with Olivia as chair. She had no desire to keep the role long-term, but the residents trusted her to clean house. As people filed out, Ruiz approached me. We're moving forward with formal charges. You'll likely be called in to testify. I'll be there. Then she handed me a folder. You might want to see this. Inside was a letter, dated 4 months ago, addressed to Francine from a law firm in the next county over. Cease and desist.
Une autorisée de surveillance.
Threat of civil action. It wasn't from a neighbor. It was from a former resident who'd moved out after Francine tried to impose fines for improper holiday lighting in the middle of July. He'd caught her installing a hidden camera on his porch light. She's been escalating for a while, Ruiz said. But no one ever had enough leverage to make it stick. Until now. Until now. By the end of that week, the city had frozen the HOA's financial accounts pending an audit. Francine's assets were subpoenaed. Her car was towed from her driveway and impounded for being purchased through misappropriated funds. And just when we thought it couldn't get worse for her, it did. The HOA's insurance provider dropped the association entirely, claimed they wouldn't cover an organization under criminal investigation. That meant every pending maintenance request, every landscaping contract, every scheduled repair frozen. But instead of chaos, something amazing happened. People pitched in. Ben from Lot 33 brought his toolbox and rewired the broken security lights near the rec center. Marla and her teenage daughters painted over the peeling fence near the playground. Seth coordinated a weekend cleanup with local volunteers. We didn't need a tyrant with a clipboard. We needed each other. A week after the emergency vote dismantled Francine's reign, the neighborhood was still buzzing, but not in the anxious, eggshells underfoot way it used to. People waved more. Kids rode bikes without their parents glancing nervously at their mailboxes. And the community bulletin board, once a graveyard of passive-aggressive notices, now held flyers for block parties and dog-walking clubs. But under all that, something darker was unfolding. I found out on a Thursday morning, right after finishing a double shift. I just pulled into my driveway when Officer Delgado pulled up behind me, lights off, window down. He didn't get out, just leaned his arm across the steering wheel and called to me quietly. "Granger, got a minute?" I nodded, stepping back onto the gravel. "What's going on?" He motioned to the passenger seat. "Might want to sit for this." I climbed in, the interior smelling faintly of leather and stale coffee. Delgado pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "You remember that USB Olivia gave you? The one you passed to Ruiz?"
Sure.
It had the doorbell footage and audio files.
Right.
Well, the forensic team flagged something in one of the older audio clips. One from 2 months ago. "We're escalating the case." I felt my stomach coil. "Escalating how?" He handed me a transcript. At the top, a label. Audio file 042, backyard meeting, lot 58. I scanned the lines, and there it was, Francine's voice, unmistakable even without the gravel rasp. But what made my jaw lock was what she'd said. "If they don't pay the fines, we lock the gates. Shut off the irrigation. Make it miserable. They'll cave." Another voice, male, answer her. "That's extortion." She'd replied, calm as a surgeon. "It's leverage." Delgado tapped the paper. "That's not all." We traced the other voice. It belonged to Marvin Klein, HOA treasurer. He passed away last month. My eyes flicked upward. Heart attack, right? That's what we thought. But Ruiz pulled the autopsy. Turns out he'd been under duress. He'd filed a complaint with the state HOA regulatory board a week before he died. Complaint never made it to the system. Someone intercepted it. You think Francine? We don't have proof of direct involvement in his death. But we do know she accessed the HOA server 2 days before the complaint vanished. I leaned back, my pulse thudding. You think she erased it to cover her tracks? She had admin access to the entire system. Email logs confirm she deleted multiple messages flagged with the words audit, dues transparency, and election. And Marvin was the only other one who had access?
Exactly.
Once he was gone, she had full control. That afternoon, Detective Ruiz brought in a forensic IT specialist. They pulled the HOA server and recovered fragments of the deleted complaint. It included a spreadsheet, Marvin's own notes detailing irregular withdrawals from the HOA account. But it went deeper than that. Francine had been sending payments to a shell landscaping company, Green Haven Groundskeeping. Only there were no trucks, no employees. The address was a vacant lot outside the city limits. And the payments? Over $60,000 across 8 months. We now had bank fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of a state investigation. Ruiz filed for a warrant. By Friday morning, the charges were formalized. The district attorney stepped in personally. Francine was now facing 6 felony counts, including financial misconduct, unlawful surveillance, and destruction of evidence in a regulatory proceeding. But the real shock came when the DA's office requested a deeper audit of the HOA's past 5 years. That's when the scope of her scheme widened. Turns out Francine didn't start this when she became president. She'd been laying the groundwork while she was still secretary. Back then, she rewrote portions of the bylaw documents, subtly changing phrases like board member approval to presidential discretion. The original documents were stored in a locked filing cabinet at the community center, but she'd replaced them with edited versions and claimed the originals were lost in storm damage. The changes gave her unilateral control over fund allocation, fine issuance, and even contract awards. No one had noticed because no one questioned the rules.
Until now.
The city's legal counsel launched an injunction against the HOA board, freezing all current contracts and launching a criminal inquiry into any vendors affiliated with Greenhaven. At the same time, subpoenas were issued for Francine's personal financial records, including her mortgage, which showed several lump sum payments that lined up perfectly with the shell company deposits. The community was stunned. At an impromptu gathering in the park, Olivia addressed the crowd. "We didn't just have a bossy president. We had a woman who built a private empire off our homes." People murmured, shaking their heads. One man, retired Navy named Paul with a prosthetic leg and a deep voice that could silence a crowd, stepped up. "I had to pay a fine for flying a flag on my porch. Said it was non-standard dimensions. She made me take it down. I'm beginning to think that money went straight into her damn pockets." A woman near the back raised her hand. "She told me I couldn't put up solar panels. Said they were an aesthetic hazard. Made me cancel the install. I lost my deposit." Another voice shouted. "She fined me for having a basketball hoop in my driveway." The stories poured out, faster than we could write them down. Ruiz and her team recorded statements. Within 48 hours, over 70 residents had submitted grievances, some going back years. But the most damning piece of evidence came from someone no one expected, Francine's own niece, a 20-something grad student named Jenna, who'd once house sat for her. She showed up at the precinct with a laptop. "She made me run reports for her," she said. "Told me it was just community management. But I started noticing weird payment requests. When I asked about them, she told me not to ask questions. I saved everything." The laptop contained backups of emails, spreadsheets, and even a scanned notebook Francine had once left open on the dining table. It was a ledger.
Handwritten.
Names, addresses, fine amounts, and notes like, "Will fold under pressure," and "Potential troublemaker monitor closely." She'd been profiling her own neighbors. When Jenna's files were cross-referenced with the HOA's official records, gaps emerged. Residents who'd challenged her were fined more aggressively. Those who'd complied were left alone. And in at least 3 cases, people had sold their homes early, citing anxiety and unlivable conditions. Francine's manipulation had driven them out. The DA added coercion and abuse of regulatory authority to the charge list. Her bail hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. The court was packed. She walked in wearing a conservative gray suit, her hair stiff and lacquered into place, and sat between 2 attorneys who looked like they regretted every career decision they'd made since passing the bar. The judge, a stern woman with a voice like dry gravel, didn't waste time. "You are accused of orchestrating a multi-year scheme to defraud your neighbors, falsify legal documents, and weaponize a homeowners association into a personal fiefdom." Francine tried to speak, but her attorney placed a hand on her arm. The judge continued, "The court finds sufficient cause to deny bail, citing risk of flight, potential witness tampering, and ongoing risk to the community." As the gavel fell, Francine stared at the floor, not blinking, not speaking, just stone still, like if she didn't move, none of it would be real. But it was very real. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Someone shoved a mic in my face. I didn't give them the soundbite they wanted. I just said, "She broke into my kitchen because I left my trash bin out." Turns out, that was the least criminal thing she'd done all year. And with that, I walked away. Back in Westfield Oaks, things were different. The new interim board implemented transparent voting procedures. Every resident now had access to financial records, and a rotating committee handled enforcement, always with community input. No more mystery fines. No more threats. The gate code was changed. The cameras were audited. And the bylaws? Rewritten from scratch. This time, in plain language, posted online, and approved by every household. We weren't just fixing what she broke. We were building something better. Together. The air in Westfield Oaks had shifted. Not just figuratively, literally. People were outside more often now, not because they had to trim hedges or measure fence heights, but because they finally could. Lawn chairs reappeared on front porches. Kids chalked dragons across the sidewalks. For the first time in years, no one flinched when a letter showed up in their mailbox. But the calm didn't mean the storm was over. Detective Ruiz called me into the precinct again the following week. She didn't say why over the phone, but her tone told me whatever it wasn't minor. I stepped into the same interview room where she'd first gone through the USB drive. This time, her desk was a mess of manila folders, court transcripts, and what looked like scanned blueprints. She waved me in without looking up. "I hope you have a strong stomach," she said, flipping open a folder and sliding it across the table. "This just came in from the state regulatory office." I glanced down. The document was a signed approval form from 3 years back, authorizing the HOA to install underground fiber optic lines along the greenbelt that bordered the neighborhood's east side. Seemed harmless until I noticed the signatures. One was Francine's. The second was Marvin Klein's. The third belonged to someone I'd never heard of, Gerald T. Holloway, listed as project consultant. Ruiz leaned forward. "That name doesn't appear in any HOA meeting minutes." We checked. No one by that name has ever attended a board meeting, submitted a contractor bid, or held any verified credentials with the municipal planning office. "So he's fake." "He's real," she said. "He just happens to be a convicted felon. Wire fraud. Served 6 years, got out 7 years ago. He's been working under different aliases ever since. We believe Francine hired him off the books to funnel HOA funds through a fake infrastructure project." I looked at the blueprint. The supposed fiber install ran parallel to the greenbelt, but according to the city's utility records, no such cables had ever been laid. The permits were forged. The money, over $90,000, was wired to a defunct contracting firm registered under Holloway's alias. "She paid a con artist to fake a construction project," I said. "With community money?" Ruiz nodded. "And that's not even the worst of it." She slid another document across the table. This one was a transfer of deed. A small parcel of land, originally part of the West End common space, what used to be the dog park, had been quietly transferred from the HOA's name into a private trust. The trustee's name? F. Dalton. "She tried to sell it," Ruiz said. "Put it on a private listing under an LLC. Asked for cash. The listing disappeared once we froze her accounts, but the paper trail's solid. She was selling off parts of the neighborhood. Without telling anyone. Without board approval. Without a vote." I leaned back, pulse rising. "That's theft. Large scale." "You're talking about real estate fraud." "We already filed the charges," Ruiz said. "But there's more. You remember the community security system? The one with the cameras she insisted on installing last year?" "Yeah." She claimed it was to monitor property lines. It wasn't. The system fed directly into a private server she controlled. The company she hired? Not a licensed surveillance firm. It was a tech startup registered to her cousin, who runs a data scraping operation out of state. "We've got evidence she was recording footage and selling metadata license plates, movement patterns, timestamps to third-party analytics companies." "She sold our data?" "Over $13,000 in contracts. Mostly to marketing firms." I closed my eyes for a beat. How did she think no one would notice? She didn't care. She assumed no one would ever look close enough. By the following Monday, the state attorney general's office had taken over the case. Francine's charges now included financial fraud, illegal surveillance, real estate theft, and conspiracy to commit data trafficking. Bail was denied again, and she was transferred to county holding pending trial. The community, shaken by the revelations, rallied in ways no one expected. Paul, the retired Navy vet, organized a neighborhood oversight committee. Olivia stepped down as interim chair, nominating a quiet but sharp woman named Denise with a background in municipal code enforcement. Denise dove into the bylaws with surgical precision, stripping out every clause Francine had manipulated and drafting new ones with actual legal consultants. We held a town hall in the middle school auditorium, and it was packed. Denise stood at the front, flanked by a projector screen and stacks of paperwork. "The old HOA structure is done," she said. "We're not just reforming, we're rebuilding. From scratch. With public input." Someone in the back asked what would happen to the funds Francine had stolen. Ruiz, who had attended in civilian clothes, stood up and answered. "Once the trial is complete, we'll pursue asset recovery. If we can prove the funds were funneled into personal assets, the court can seize them and return them to the community trust." A murmur of cautious hope passed through the crowd. But not everyone was ready to move on. Later that night, I found Seth sitting on my front steps, flipping through a binder of old HOA letters. He looked up as I approached, his eyes tired. "She ruined people, man," he said. "You know that, right? There's a couple down on Elm who spent their savings fighting one of her bogus lawsuits. Had to remortgage their place just to stay afloat." I sat beside him, staring out at the quiet street. "I know, but we got her. That doesn't erase what happened, but it means she won't do it again." He nodded slowly. "You think it'll stick? The charges. They've got a digital paper trail, bank records, forged permits, private surveillance feeds. It's airtight. She's not slipping out of this." He sighed, closing the binder. "Still feels surreal. Like she was just living next door. And now she's a felon." "She was always that person," I said. "We just didn't know how far she'd go." The trial began 3 weeks later. It wasn't a media circus, though a few networks did cover it. Francine appeared in court in plain clothes, her hair undone, face paler than I'd ever seen it. No more smugness. No more clipboard. Just a woman unraveling under the weight of her own lies. Prosecutors laid out everything: the fake contractor, the forged permits, the data sales, the deed transfer. Jenna, her niece, testified. So did Olivia. So did I. The defense tried to argue that Francine had been overzealous, not criminal, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 22 years, with eligibility for parole after 15. When the judge read the sentence, Francine said nothing. Just stared ahead, hands folded, like a mannequin on display.
No apology. No explanation.
She was let out in cuffs. Afterward, Ruiz met me on the courthouse steps. "You did good, Granger," she said. "Most people just complain. You built a case. Couldn't have done it alone. You didn't. And that's why it worked." Weeks passed. The HOA was formally dissolved. In its place, Westfield Oaks formed a neighborhood council, not a governing body, but a volunteer group focused on community projects and shared maintenance.
No fines.
No secret meetings. Just neighbors helping neighbors. We dug up the fake fiber optic trench and replanted it with wildflowers. The parcel of land Francine tried to sell was restored to public use, turned into a community garden with a hand-painted sign that read, "Ours again." Zeus and I took walks through it every evening. He liked the tomato patch. People still talked about what happened sometimes, but not with bitterness. More like a lesson, a reminder. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. And Francine Dalton? She revealed everything. Too late for herself, but just in time for the rest of us.